The graphics card market has changed massively in the last few months, with a seemingly endless number of new GPU releases and price drops across the board. But with new options to consider, just which graphics cards should you buy in 2024? Well, in this video, I'll be walking through the best options for all price points, covering cards great for 1080p, 1440p, and 4K gaming, and crucially, pointing out the cards to avoid. Let's do this. The MSI 342C QD OLED is an epic 34-inch ultra-wide monitor with a 3440 by 1440 resolution, 1800R curvature, 175Hz refresh rate, and low 0.03 millisecond response time. Learn more about this stunning quantum dot OLED panel at the first link below. Now, we've seen quite a few new cards over the last couple of months. From NVIDIA's midlife super refresh GPUs that look to bring more performance and better pricing to existing models, AMD, who have taken their existing 8GB RX 7600 and jazzed it up a bit with more VRAM, and even Intel, whose seemingly relentless driver optimizations make their ARC cards actually a better option than they've ever been. I'm going to walk through my recommendations from the cheapest through to the most expensive, and you can use the timestamps below to navigate to my top picks. Links to everything, by the way, will be below. Before that though, let's quickly explain the state of the GPU market right now. On the NVIDIA side, you've got the RTX 40 series. This ranges from the 4060 right up to the 4090. Cards with their TI designation on the end are slightly beefier and more powerful than their non-TI derivatives, while the new super GPUs, which have replaced the 4070 Ti with the 4070 Ti Super and the 4080 with the 4080 Super, look to bring a bit more performance and better pricing. It's worth noting, NVIDIA have also released a 4070 Super, which improves upon the original 4070, but they haven't discontinued the non-super 4070 variant. Confusing, right? The higher the number, the more performance, and all of these cards on the RTX 40 series support ray tracing, DLSS 3.5, and of course NVIDIA's suite of broadcast technology. On the AMD side, there are less SKUs to consider, which simplifies things somewhat, on their RX 7000 series, which ranges from the base model RX 7600 right up to the top-end 7900 XTX. The XT and XTX derivatives are a bit like NVIDIA's TI branding. They take the base cards, should one exist, and give it that bit more power. Confusingly, AMD also have the 6000 series, which is their last gen of cards, which are also still widely available, and we'll touch on those in my suite of recommendations today. On the Intel side, there are not really particularly many cards to consider. Their ARC lineup consists of their Intel Arc 3, 5, and 7 lineups. That's intended to kind of mirror the Intel Core i3, i5, and i7. But is one better than the other? Not necessarily. Intel are still lagging behind, especially outside of that budget market, though things are getting a lot better, so keep an eye on them as things progress. NVIDIA obviously has pros like better ray tracing, and their DLSS 3.5 with FrameGen is much better than AMD's alternative, but you'll pay a bit more for the pleasure, and with AMD, you tend to get more VRAM and better rasterization performance. Rasterization performance is like the straight gaming performance output. When you take all of the AI enhancements out, you take the FrameGen, you take DLSS out of the equation, you put ray tracing in the bin, and you just keep things nice and simple. So that leads me nicely on to the recommendations. On the budget end, what should you buy? Now, there's a couple of options to pick from. AMD's budget entrant is the RX 7600. We're talking about the standard 8GB model. This retails for an MSRP of $269 and can often be found for or even slightly below this MSRP price point. As you'll see from our testing, the RX 7600 really holds its own. In everything from esports titles like Fortnite and Apex Legends, at 1080p where you're looking to achieve those really high competitive frame rates, to even AAA titles like Hogwarts Legacy as one example and Starfield as another, you'll see good results too. The 1440p performance is limited by the VRAM. This card only has 8GB of video memory. Ideally, we'd like to see 10 or 12GB on a card of this price point or this tier in the future. AMD have recently tried to remedy this problem by putting an extra 8GB on the slightly more expensive XT version of this card. On paper that sounds great, but the lack of memory bandwidth makes that a difficult card to recommend, unless you're really dead set on having the extra video memory. Unfortunately at this price point, NVIDIA haven't got a great deal to compete. Their RTX 4060 is the closest price card at $299, though if you watched our review of that card, you'll know it's not very good. The RX 7600 consistently beats it across the board. And in fact, the 7600 often beats out the more expensive 4060 Ti, a card that comes in from $399, showing that NVIDIA have kind of lost the bottom end of the market in quite a big way. Other cards of notability at this price point you should consider include the RX 6750 XT. This card has 12 gigs of video memory and comes from the last gen 6000 series lineup. You don't actually see many compromises here, but availability is getting a bit harder. About 2 or 3 months ago, you could commonly find this for say $320, $330, but now stock is struggling. AMD aren't making their 6000 series cards anymore for obvious reasons, so it makes sense that cards like this are getting a bit harder to get hold of. But what if you've got a bit more money to spend? We've established that the 7600 is the best card on the whole for 1080p gaming on a fairly tight budget. But for 1440p, you want the extra VRAM and you want the extra performance that comes with that. And for this, there's actually a fairly unlikely contender. It's AMD's RX 7700 XT. Now, I say this is an unlikely contender because when it first launched, the reception was a little bit mixed. Not because this card didn't offer great performance, but because it was a little bit too expensive. And its more pricey bigger brother, the 7800 XT, which I've got right here, came in for only $50 more. AMD have recognized this, as they often do, and we've seen price drops on the 7700 XT that now put the price differential between these two cards at closer to $100. The 7700 XT is often available for a shave over $400. For context, that's the same price as a base model 8GB RTX 4060 Ti. This card gives you 4 gigs more VRAM and a lot more performance, and is a GPU that is incredibly capable when it comes to 1440p gaming. In fact, I'd go as far to say it's the best all-round 1440p GPU we've seen on the channel ever. In all of our testing of a wide suite of games, the 7700 XT holds its own. That rasterization performance is phenomenal, and when you look at the cost per frame in a game like Apex Legends, you can see that the RX 7700 XT sits at the bottom of the chart, which is obviously good because the lower the cost per frame, the more you're getting for your money, making it one of the best value GPUs currently in our testing suite. And for context, we've tested a lot of graphics cards. Now, if you want a little bit more oomph at 1440p and want something where you know you can push at that resolution for years to come, spending the extra on the RX 7800 XT is a fantastic shout. This is a card that's come under a bit of pressure recently, especially from NVIDIA. This card retails for an MSRP of $499, but due to popularity, it's honestly often seen above that. We're talking $510, $520. So not a huge jump, but finding one of these for $499 and having a good pick of coolers is not always possible. The competition this card is now faced with, though, is the RTX 4070. When NVIDIA launched the new 4070 Super, they dropped the price of the 4070 down to $499, a direct MSRP match for this GPU. With the prices of the 7800 XT, as I say, being that bit higher sometimes, the 4070 may actually be a cheaper option. But the performance differential between these two cards is really tight. In fact, this is the first area today where I'd say NVIDIA have a real chance of winning your purchase. If you're really after features like DLSS 3 and ray tracing, technologies which are both far better on NVIDIA at present than they are on AMD, the 4070 might be a more worthwhile pick in this area. It's about 50-50 as to which card wins out. The advantage really that you get with the AMD card comes with the VRAM. Again, this has more VRAM than its NVIDIA counterpart. 16 on here, while the 4070 standard non-super only has 12. The extra 4 gigs is not going to be the absolute deal breaker for a lot of people, but games are requiring more and more video memory, and if you look into the future, if I'm being honest, I would personally opt for the extra VRAM over anything else. Now, what if you want to step up to a bit of 4K gaming performance? And this is where things get really, really complicated. And the reason for that is that the price disparity between some of these higher end cards is just a bit nuts. They start from the RTX 4070 Ti Super and RX 7900 XT and go right through to the incredibly crazy expensive RTX 4090. Now, the RTX 4070 Ti Super, when it was announced, looked like it was going to dominate this portion of the market. You've got 16GB of video memory with improved performance over the original RTX 4070 Ti, all at the same price. So a 10 or 15% performance uplift while spending no more money. AMD didn't have anything to compete in this segment, with the RX 7900 XT coming in at about $800. But then AMD came back and went, yes, another price drop. Now, technically, I think it's temporary, but I think this will end up sticking, pushing the 7900 XT down to about $700 or £700. What was going to make the RTX 4070 Ti Super an easy recommendation changed the whole game, and I'm afraid the RX 7900 XT would be my go-to pick if you're after a really capable 4K GPU that isn't going to cost you as much as a 4080 or 4090. Talking of which, the RTX 4080 Super is our next recommendation. If you want really solid 4K performance without spending the money you'll spend on a RTX 4090, the 4080 Super is really your only option. This one is the MSI Heavy Expert card, which is kind of like a Founders Edition inspired design that's absolutely massive. The 4080 Super basically looks to kill off the RX 7900 XTX. That's the bigger brother to the 7900 XT. It does so with obviously that class-leading ray tracing and DLSS, but also great rasterization performance, and is a card that many people are going to struggle to compete with. A lot of people said that they would like to have seen more competitive pricing from NVIDIA on the 4080 Super, but honestly, for $1,000, it is what I would buy, and I think it makes the most sense for those of you looking for a really high-end config. Obviously, you can work through the price brackets again and pick up the 4090 for the best of the best, but if you've got $2,000 to spend on a GPU, you're probably not watching this video. So to summarize, buying on a budget, pick up the RX 7600. Go for the 8GB version unless you really need the extra VRAM. Got a little bit more money to spend, consider the RX 7700 XT or 7800 XT. Personally, I'd go for the 7800 XT if you have the extra cash to spare. More money again, and you'll want to consider either the 4070 Ti Super or the RX 7900 XT, probably the AMD card for more VRAM and better value for money. While on the top end, I do gravitate towards the 4080 Super as a card that has the all-round package for 4K gaming. Keep your eyes on Intel as they are getting a lot better, but I'm afraid our plucky ARC cards are not quite there just yet. You can check latest pricing and availability globally for these cards at the links down below. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.